Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. I'm Dan Tishner. I'm a professor of political science and a program director at the Wayne Moore Center for Law and Politics, and we're delighted you're here. Normally, I would encourage you to get pizza, but I see everyone chewing, and you're all set. So just know there's plenty, so feel free to go back and get more. And just to highlight for you, if you didn't see this coming in, you might check it out when you leave. It's just a lot of other events coming up. And so we have bookmarks events, 2 of them coming up, which is for authors who are doing really interesting work that touches on politics and social issues. The very next one is with Alexander Felindra, who wrote a book called Race, Rights, and Rifles, The Origins of the NRA and Contemporary Gun Culture. And so in any case, you might just want to take a peek. Also, Anita Hill and Nicholas Kristoff are coming soon, so a lot of folks who I think you'd find interesting, so you might want to mark those down. So on to our main event. I am delighted to introduce Kevin Esterling, who is the professor of public policy and political science at the University of California, Riverside. He's an affiliate of UC's Institute on Global Conflict and Cooperation and director of the Laboratory for Technology, Communication, and Democracy. Professor Esterling's research focuses on technology for communication in democratic politics, and in particular the use of artificial intelligence and large language models for understanding and improving the quality of democratic communication in online spaces. Along with numerous articles in the top journals in our political science profession, Kevin's books include The Political Economy of Expertise, which came out with the University of Michigan Press, and the Politics with the People, Building a Directly Representative Democracy with Cambridge University Press. His research has been supported by the National Science Foundation, the Democracy Fund, the MacArthur Foundation, and the Institute of Education Sciences. He is also a Robert Wood Johnson Scholar in Health Policy Research, which he did at UC Berkeley, and a research fellow at the Taubman Center for Public Policy and American Institutions at Brown University. I particularly want to highlight that his Laboratory for Technology, Communication, and Democracy started in 2019, and it aims to design and develop communication technology that makes democracy more robust, responsive, and resilient. So as such, it really fits perfectly with the ongoing theme of the Wayne Moore Center of defending democracy. And his talk for today is titled The New Town Hall, Building a Communications Platform for Democracy. So please join me in welcoming Professor Esterling to the University of Oregon.
Thank you so much, Dan. And thanks to all of you for coming to the talk today. I hope you find it interesting. I'm really interested to hear what your guys' thoughts and comments are about what we're trying to do. And what I'm going to try to do today is to make the case that we're doing something that's going to do a little bit of good. But we'll see, and you guys will let me know. Okay, so public meetings have long been a cornerstone of democracy. And in their ideal case, they enable public officials to understand the diverse perspectives in their community on important policy issues. But as I think you all know, and if you read the newspapers, you definitely know that nowadays public meetings have a lot of dysfunctions in practice. And in particular, they tend to amplify more powerful interests, and the voices of underserved communities oftentimes aren't heard. So the people who show up at public meetings, generally speaking, are unrepresentative of the community. A lot of times it's the people with the loudest voices who maybe have an axe to grind. And when they show up at the meeting, a lot of times they don't really have strong incentives to engage constructively or even necessarily to stay on topic or to avoid trafficking in misinformation or conspiracy theories. And so as a result, because of these dysfunctions, public officials really don't find public meetings all that informative for them in their work. Even the ones that really do want to understand, right, how to do their work to serve the community, public meetings don't really give them the information that they need, because essentially to them it's a bunch of these kind of odd people that show up and just yell at them. And so when they do hold public meetings, they either just dread them or They see a lot of public officials, especially ones that have like public meeting obligations, right? And I know in California we do, and probably here in Oregon as well. That what they'll do is they'll hold the public meetings as a way for community members just to come and vent at them, but then the public officials will go back to their office and do what they would have done anyway. So public officials, I think, generally speaking, are very frustrated with the way public meetings work in practice, and they really don't help them gain insights into doing their work better. And I think that we're all, for these reasons, we're all kind of frustrated with how public meetings work nowadays. And so what we want to do is to try to make things a little bit better. And so to do that, my lab is building a new online public meeting platform that we call Protanium. That's designed to try to make public meetings more constructive, more inclusive, more informative for public officials, and maybe help to make public meetings better approximate their democratic ideal. And so you guys might be wondering, because there's already all of these other platforms that exist, right? Public officials already use webinars and social media streaming sites to do online public meetings. Why should we go through this effort to build a whole new platform, right? And I think especially during the pandemic, a lot of public agencies switched to doing remote meetings. At least some of their meetings are remote, and then they pretty much all adopted making use of these platforms like webinars and social media streaming sites. And so why go through the effort to build something new? And the reason is because these other platforms, webinars and social media streaming sites, were not built with democratic engagement in mind. And so the problem with them is that not only do existing platforms do nothing to try to reverse these dysfunctions that I was describing on the previous screen, they actually layer an additional layer of dysfunctions on top of already dysfunction meetings. And you guys can see that because you all have been on a webinar at some point. And so you know that webinars are a really good tool for one person or a small group of people to message to a large audience. But they're a terrible tool for that audience to try to speak back in response to something the speaker said, which is something that's really required for democratic engagement, to have that kind of two-way discussion. And in fact, webinars by their design, that they're designed purposefully to disempower the participants, right? That there really isn't a way to speak back, right? And when you're a participant on a webinar. And so your options in terms of the technology would be like if the speaker said something that you disagreed with, or maybe you want to elaborate on, like your option is to kind of hunch over your keyboard and type into the little chat box that they provide, and you angrily will type something in, right, and hit submit. But if there's like 500 other people in the meeting also typing into that chat box, what you get is, and you've all seen it, right, that the text, like the chat box streams by so quickly that you can't even read it, right? So the problem with webinars is that, right, they're just by their design, they layer additional dysfunctions on top of an already dysfunctional system, and that they're kind of purposefully built to disempower participants. And so what we want to do is to rethink the design for webinars and to build a platform that can maybe reverse all of these different dysfunctions, right? To solve that to give participants, to empower participants to have a voice in real time during the meeting, but also to really take it as an opportunity to maybe try to do something to correct some of the other kind of underlying pathologies of public meetings. And so the way we're going to do that is trying to make good use of good engineering design principles, right, to solve these many pathologies of public meetings. And so what we're trying to do is essentially to solve these two problems, right, to use better design to solve these two problems. So the first problem is how do we give participants an effective voice in real time during a meeting? And then problem two is how do we create incentives for the participants to engage constructively, to stay on topic, to avoid trafficking in misinformation or conspiracy theories, and to make sure that all the diverse perspectives in the community are heard in real time during the meeting, right? So not just the perspectives of the people who happen to show up, right, the kind of dominant voices that show up at a meeting, but to really help the public official uncover all of the diverse perspectives in the community. And so the way we're going to try to solve these problems, right, is through engineering sort of better web design, to have a better user interface design, and also to use data science to really to build in kind of better back-end algorithmic curation that will create a different set of incentives for people to engage. And so what I'm going to do in the talk is just talk about how we're trying to solve each of these two problems. First I'll talk about how we solve problem one, and then I'll talk about how we try to solve problem two. And I'll say in advance that problem one is a really easy one to solve, and problem two is a really hard problem to solve. And so that's where you guys, but both of them are things that are important to solve. Okay, so solving problem one, how do we give participants an effective voice in real time during a public meeting? And the answer is through improved web design, through improved user interface design. And so you can think of Protanium as sort of a blend between a webinar and social media. But unlike a webinar, Protanium gives the participants lots of robust opportunities to share their perspectives in real time during the meeting. And when you're on it, so Protanium is a webinar platform, but when you're on it, it feels sort of, as a participant, you feel sort of like, it feels kind of like engaging on Twitter or now X, right? It has that kind of, like we designed it with that kind of feel that, and you can see, right? And so, I'm not gonna demo it, but just you can see from the screenshot, that the main feature is this kind of question and comment list that everybody can contribute to, that everybody sees, and people can, like on Twitter, they can like other people's questions and comments, right? And the facilitator can kind of track how many likes each comment gets. Or you can quote, press the quote thing, and that'll quote somebody else's comment that you can kind of amend or elaborate in some way, just like sort of like a quote tweet. And then another way that participants can engage is by, I don't have a screenshot for it, but you can tab over and click on the feedback tab, and that gives you a direct messaging channel with the facilitators and the organizers to have kind of a one-on-one real-time interaction, right, to have that kind of engagement directly and substantively. So those are important tools, but then what I think is the most important tool that we provide is what we call the feedback response option, which is where the speaker can deploy survey-like questions to the audience. And so we have two versions of it. The one that I have a screenshot here is what we call the vote version, where they can vote, right, should we ban gas stoves in Eugene, Oregon, right? And people can vote for or against or say that they're conflicted. There's another version of this that's more general where the speaker can deploy a prompt and then give them multiple choice options that they can fill in. And so people can choose like which option they like the best. So that's sort of like real-time polling, but one big difference is that we don't just collect people's choices or votes, but in order for the participant to submit their choice or vote, they have to type the reason for why they're making their choice, right? And so as a result, what we do is not just collect kind of the distribution of votes or choices, but we actually collect the reasoning for why people made their choices. And that's something that's really important for public officials, right? So these are all different ways that we've built these features that enable participants to really share their views robustly during the meeting, just through improved user interface design. And that's all built. And we've also built on the back end for the facilitator, the organizer of the event gets to see that question list, but they also get a whole set of tools that I'm not going to explain what they all do, but they're kind of a set of tools that enable the facilitator to kind of sort through and curate the content in real time during the meeting in order to decide an effective flow for the meeting. And so you could think about, like for any meeting that you've ever been in that's been a good meeting, right? You've had somebody who's been a facilitator that's kind of facilitating, right, the meeting in some way. So like if Dan at a faculty meeting says something that's off topic, then his chair is going to say, I'm sorry, Dan, but that's not helpful, or that's not off topic, or it's wrong, right? And so for any meeting, whether it's in person or online, has to have some kind of effective facilitation to kind of prioritize, right, the important stuff, the on-topic stuff, the factually accurate stuff, and also to make sure that all the different views are heard, right? That all the different perspectives are voiced. And so that's what an effective facilitator does. And so that's what we want we provide these tools to allow the organizer to do that kind of facilitation. But there's limits to what you can do with the user interface design, because when the meeting scales to a large number of people, so like you imagine if there's a meeting with 1,000 people, and all 1,000 people have like lots of robust ways to share their views in real time, what the facilitator sees is just this avalanche or flood of text information coming in that's very hard to keep on top of, just in terms of as a human to kind of process all of it. The way we solve it right now is I have a close collaboration with my colleague at Ohio State, who has an institute that does these really big online town halls, and he's my collaborator. And what they do when they are gonna do an event where they expect like 1,000 people to show up, what they actually do is they'll have a team of 6 PhD students that are behind the scenes kind of doing this curation, right? And it takes that, if you have 1,000 people, it takes like 6 PhD students to kind of process everything. And they kind of divide the work up and they have a workflow. But what we want is to make Protanium something that works more in the everyday workflow of democracy, right? That a public agency could use it in an everyday kind of way. And so if you're a public agency, you probably aren't gonna have like 6 PhD students to do this work manually. And so what we want to do is to make it so that this curation scales even when there's a large number of people in the meeting. And in fact, my colleagues at Ohio State are begging us to do something, right, to try to facilitate, to improve facilitation by building in algorithmic curation, which would essentially be able, that ideally would do the same thing that these 6 PhD students are doing, but doing it in a more automated way. And there's a bunch of things we can do that's actually pretty easy, that's not that hard to do. Just things that would help them would be that as people are posting content to the platform, to just classify, right, to group questions that are really similar to each other together, right? So if there's like a dozen people have asked essentially the same question, they would want to see all of those so they could pick out, well, which one's the best version, right? So just something really simple like that, or more ambitiously to group, when people make contributions, to group it by topic, right? So an event would be on some issue, and the issue is going to have certain different aspects to it. So to kind of group people's contributions so that comments that are on a given topic are all grouped together. And that way they can kind of sort through and see, well, what kinds of things are people saying about this topic, maybe prioritize the stuff that's most important, but also to make sure, like within a topic, that all the different perspectives get heard, right? And so those are things that you can actually, they're actually not that hard with today's text analysis tool to build in that kind of curation. And as I said, they're begging us to solve this, right? Because it's really not sustainable to have kind of that big of a team run a meeting. And so we want to build in algorithmic curation to help with this facilitation, just for that very practical reason that humans are not, like, just can't process that much information in real time. But what we want to do is, because we're building in that curation, we want to do it in a purposeful way to try to make sure that to design the curation in a way that creates good incentives for people to engage the meeting constructively, and also to make sure that all the diverse perspectives are heard. And so that's how we're going to try to solve problem 2, right? To create incentives for people to engage constructively, to stay on topic, to not traffic in misinformation, and to make sure the diverse perspectives are heard through careful design of our algorithmic curation. But before I say how we do that, I want to say that you are all familiar already with algorithmic curation, like every one of you, because whatever social media platform, maybe not, I don't actually use social media, but if you use social media, you know what curation does, because what social media companies do, like X or Facebook or YouTube or TikTok, they all have algorithmic curation that determines what you see in your feed when you go onto that social media site. They already do that. And so you already experience it. But of course, because social media companies are for-profit companies, they want to make as much money as possible. And this is stuff that they figured out a long time ago. The way they make the most money is by giving you information you already agree with and put you into an echo chamber, which reinforces your own biases, right? That facilitates your spreading misinformation, right? And makes you angry, right? And angry and polarized. And then when you get angry, you go back, you return to their platform more often and they make more money, right? Which is like, so social media companies use their algorithmic curation to create a set of incentives. But those incentives are misaligned with democracy. They're incentives to get us to engage in a way that really undermines democracy. And so just to preview, what we want to do with our curation is to do the exact opposite of everything they do. We're going to do it the exact opposite way. And hopefully, right, to think about, is there a way to leverage this kind of curation to make democracy more robust and more functional? And so so hear me out. Let me tell you what we're trying to do, right? So we're trying to kind of motivate the algorithmic design using democratic principles. And I want to be upfront right now that we are making use of, we're making use of large language model, AI, technology to do this kind of curation. It's a really powerful way of curating text data. But I know that everybody has very good reason to be skeptical of AI, right? And we're all worried about AI destroying humanity and that kind of thing. But it really is, it's amazing. It's amazing. It's just astounding how powerful AI is. And so what we want to do is to leverage that power to see if we can use it to do some good, right? Because for the most part, it's being used to do bad things. Okay, so again, just hear me out. Let me tell you what we're trying to do, and then you can let me know if you think it's going to work. And so we're designing the algorithm, this kind of large language model algorithm, making use of two design principles, right? So principle one, to have the algorithm prioritize content that's on topic and factually accurate. And then design principle two is to use the technology to try to ensure that all the diverse perspectives get heard in real time during the meeting. And then just to be clear, for problem two is not just the diverse perspectives of the people who showed up, right, or just sort of the majority view of the people who happen to show up at the meeting, but to try to unearth the diverse perspectives in the community. So that's a bit more ambitious, and that's what we're trying to do. These are our aspirations, okay? And so let me tell you how we're trying to design the algorithm to do these two things, and then you guys can let me know if you think it's going to work. And so any algorithm is going to have some input, it's going to do some task, and then it's going to result in some kind of output. And so for principle one, prioritizing content that's on topic and factually accurate, what we're going to do is we generally, when we do a meeting on Britannium, we'll do it in collaboration with a public official, like an agency official, maybe an elected official, but generally it's like sort of aimed more at public agencies. And so what we do is we ask the agency to provide us with a reading material that's factually accurate and politically balanced. And most agencies, that's kind of their job to be able to do that. So it's not a huge ask. And there might be ways to kind of test, right, if it's sort of the adequacy of the reading material. But if you can assume that an agency can do that, right, they give us this reading material that's factually accurate, politically balanced, and accessible, right, then that's the reading material that eventually we'll distribute to the town hall participants so they can read in advance and become kind of knowledgeable about the issues so they can engage, right? But so they give us this reading material. But then what we do with the algorithm is we take that reading material and upload it into our website. And the algorithm takes that reading material in and uses that reading material to identify kind of substantively what are the topics that it expects to see at an upcoming town hall, right, on that issue. And so what we're able to do, what we want to do then is to kind of anchor the large language model on this factually accurate, politically neutral reading material. So when the algorithm is classifying content to different topics, that it doesn't just do it based on whatever it was pre-trained on, all of the kind of junk and garbage that they use to pre-train the model. We tell the large language model, before you do a classify content, make reference to this factually accurate, politically reading material first, and then make your classification. So that way we're kind of anchoring the LLM to something that we know is unbiased and factually accurate. And so then we can have the LLM come back and say these are the contributions that are most on topic and most relevant, and have it. And then as the output, right, it'll do that. It'll say, like, if people are submitting comments that are on topic, it'll classify them into which aspect of the issue, right, each post is relevant to. But then if you think about it, it's also going to think if people submit things that are off topic or misinformed, the LLM will just set it off to the side and say, well, that's in this bucket of off-topic content that we don't have to worry about. Okay, so that's the first half of the algorithm. The second half is to try to tackle design principle number 2, is to make sure that diverse perspectives in the community are heard. And here the input is going to be our plan is to administer what we're calling a community survey to the community in advance of a meeting as part of the meeting planning. And what the community survey will do is we're going to make use of methods that we can discuss to make sure that the survey covers the full community. Every corner of the community is going to have an opportunity to fill out the survey. And what the survey is going to do is it's going to list the topics that we propose to discuss, that the public agency is going to discuss at this upcoming meeting, and list those and ask the community members, well, which of these topics are important to you? And maybe more importantly, are there aspects of this issue about banning gas stoves in Eugene that we haven't thought about that we should discuss, right? So it's a way of kind of getting feedback from the community about priority topics, because one thing you don't want to do is for the first part of the algorithm, if the community cares about something that you didn't know they cared about, right, and you didn't tell the algorithm, it would take all of those comments and post them as off topic, right? So we want to make sure that we're being inclusive, that all the different perspectives in the community are heard, right, and none of them are just kind of classified as off topic. And then the second thing the survey is going to do is it's going to have these open-ended questions that just ask people, like, why do you care about this issue? Like, how does it impact you? What are your interests? What are your concerns, right? And so then they'll give them a chance to type in text into these open-ended responses that enable us to then gather all of the stakeholder perspectives in the community, right? So we can understand, like, all the different perspectives that are in the community itself, even before we run the meeting. And so what that'll do is, if we anchor the LLM to the community survey, just like we anchored it to the reading material, if we anchor it to the community survey, right, then that helps to ensure that the LLM is not just classifying things that are on topic and factually accurate, but that it's prioritizing content that's important to the community, and that it's making sure all the diverse perspectives in the community are heard in real time during the meeting, right? So not just giving a voice to the people who happen to show up, but to make sure the whole community gets covered. And so that's what we're trying to do with the LLM, is to kind of get it to, right, sort of scaffold it on these two inputs. And so if we can anchor the LLM to this factual reading material in the community survey, right, that makes it a more defensible use of the LLM than if we had just used the LLM sort of off the shelf. Because you guys know these large language models are just trained on all of the junk that ChatGPT and Google Palm made use of, that they just found whatever junk they found on the internet, it all got trained on that. And so we don't want to just use that. We want to use these to anchor the LLM to these things that we know are help to make sure that the LLM is classifying things that are factually accurate and of relevance and importance to the community. Okay, so abstractly, you could think of any issue is going to be composed of topics and stakeholder views. And so Protanium is not, it's designed for public officials to talk about a single issue, right? To go into depth in a single issue. So Protanium is not, it's not a good tool for an open mic night, like where people talk about like whatever topic they want to talk about. It's just not designed for that. But if there's an issue, right, for any issue, what, banning gas stoves in Eugene, or dealing with homelessness in Riverside, or how to fund K through 12 mental health services in Riverside County, like all of these topics are composed of different aspects that we want to make sure that we cover those. And so for every issue, there's a set of aspects that we call topics, right? So you could think of, right, those so an issue is composed of topics, but then in a community, there's going to be different stakeholder perspectives that have different views on each of those topics. And so a stakeholder, not every stakeholder is going to care about every topic. But if you think about it, right, if a topic, like let's say topic B is a priority for the community, for any given topic, there's going to be a diverse set of views in the community about that topic, right? And so that's what we want to do, is use the survey to make sure, right, that all those different perspectives are heard. And obviously what it means is that we have to get at least one person from each of these different stakeholder perspectives to show up at the meeting. But these meetings are usually like 1,000 people, so it's not that hard to get that kind of coverage. But it's ensuring that it's not just the majority of the wealthy suburban homeowners that show up at every meeting that dominate the meeting. It's a way of making sure all the different perspectives are heard. And so that's what we think, that the AI is going to create different incentives. This algorithm will create different incentives. The NSF calls efforts to use computing to create environments that lead to more human collaboration. They call that human-centered computing. And so that's what we think of as that what we're trying to do is this kind of human-centered computing. Not just because we want money from them, but I do think that that's actually what we're trying to do. But if we're able to do this, right, to anchor the LLM to factually accurate, on topic, politically balanced information, and to make sure the community, right, all the diverse perspectives, the priorities and perspectives in the community are sort of understood in advance of the meeting, and kind of anchor or scaffold the LLM on that, we think that this algorithm is going to create a new set of incentives for how people participate in meetings. Because if you know, right, and if we're transparent with participants that we are doing this is the curation that we're doing, then what that means is, as a participant, if you want to have an impact, to have the biggest impact on the meeting, what that means is you have to work really hard to stay on topic and be constructive, and to not traffic in misinformation and conspiracy theories, right? And then engaging it, that you know that you're going to hear views from people that are different from you. And I think so we're hoping, right, that creates good incentives. And then what's interesting is, I'm a political scientist like Dan, and so building this technology is not none of us I was not trained to do this in grad school. But what's really interesting is working with computer scientists and building a new platform. The very first thing they think about is how is it that bad actors are going to come and try to undermine the meeting or to undermine your technology in some way. That's the very first thing that they think about. And I'm glad that we do that, because you really have to anticipate that, especially in today's world, right? That people get really mad about stuff, right? And you have all these people, right, that whenever your planning department or a public official is going to hold a public meeting, there's going to be people that are going to want to attack the meeting in some way. And so we think that this technology will help to inoculate against bad actors, because if you're holding a town hall on gas stoves in Eugene, right, and then you have a coordinated group of people that descend on the meeting, because they want to talk about Biden and the border, or they want to talk about potholes on their street, or whatever it is that they want to do that undermines the meeting, they can do that. They can get so people can come on and contribute all of that content, and even toxic content. They have at it, because they can do that all they want, because what's going to happen is the algorithm will take all of this content that's off topic or toxic or misinformed and just set it off to the side, and it'll have no impact, right? And so that kind of, I think that the design helps to inoculate the town hall against bad actors, and our intention is then it creates good incentives for people to say, well, if that's what they're doing, my only recourse is to engage constructively, right? Even if they maybe didn't want to originally. Okay, is it okay if I just do a couple more slides? And so I thought it'd help to say what the workflow looks like if one goes into the field with Protanium. We're actually going to pilot all of this new technology. We're building the algorithm right now, and so we're going to pilot Protanium in collaboration with the big state mental health commission in California. That's the commission that provides gigantic grants to counties that fund mental health services. And our topic is going to be, they implement something called the Mental Health Student Services Act, which is how the state gives big grants to counties to fund mental health services in K through 12 schools. And so we're very lucky that this commission is from the executive director on down, that everybody that works there actually cares a lot about what communities think about their work. And so they're great. It's really, really great. Not every public official that I've spoken with has that orientation, but they do. And so it's really great. So we're going to be piloting it, but it's general to really any area and any topic. And so what you do is you collaborate with your agency and choose a meeting issue, a meeting, actually should be issue, not topic. And then we ask the agency to provide unbiased, politically neutral, factually accurate, and accessible reading material that you're going to eventually distribute to the participants who are going to come to your town hall. But then, as I mentioned, what you do as the organizer is then you upload this politically balanced, factually accurate, substantively relevant reading material into the AI. And what happens is then when you put it in there, the way it's designed, and this part's already built, is you feed in the reading material, and the AI will actually come back and say, okay, Kevin, here's a set of topics that the AI, we use Google Palm, but any of these would do it, that I, as the AI, have discovered these topics in your reading material. What do you think? And so then the organizer can actually go and say, well, to the AI, these topics are good, so keep those. Discard these topics, and then you can manually add some of your own and say, consider these topics. And then you press regenerate. And so then the AI will use that human input to try again, to generate a new topic list, right? And it's designed that the organizer can do it iteratively to keep regenerating until you have a good, exhaustive, good, defensible topic list. And so you can see we're not using the AI. The AI is not telling the organizer what the topics are, but it really does. It's using AI to help the organizer to kind of brainstorm to make sure the organizer is being exhaustive of the topics. And what's really crazy is, I don't know if you guys you probably have used ChatGPT and stuff, but it's crazy how smart that stuff is, how powerful. So we did this for this Mental Health Student Services Act reading material, and it came back with the first try was a pretty good topic list of and it's just, anyway, it's a little bit unsettling in a way that is so good, but we're not. But there's no place in where the AI is deciding what the topics are, right? It's the AI is kind of helping the organizer brainstorm to be exhaustive. So in the end, the human is the one that's still controlling things for us. And then, so that generates this initial topic list. And then what you do as the organizer is you take your curated topic list and you put it into your community survey, and you send the survey out using methods that we can talk about to make sure that you get good coverage of the community, including the hard-to-reach areas of the community. We're using respondent-driven sampling, a version of it, and we can talk about that. But then if you can imagine getting the survey out to everybody, right, and then that survey then can help to learn from the community, like for your initial topic list, well, what do people want to talk about, right, and what are the priorities? And then more importantly, when you did this initial regenerating, did you leave anything out, right, in the community? So you're not sort of kind of classifying some important things as off topic in advance. And then also the survey then will collect all these the diverse stakeholder perspectives as well that are in the community before you even hold your meeting, right? And then you use the reading material and the survey to finish up the planning of the event, right? And then that all gets fed into the AI, and then the AI then is all trained and ready to go to classify content based on if it's on topic and factually accurate, if it reflects community priorities, and to really make sure all the diverse perspectives, right, get uncovered during the meeting. Then you invite the public to the event. You give them the reading material, and then you host the event, and then report back to the agency with the insights that you got from. So that's like what a workflow would look like when you're going into the field. I have to do there's only one more slide after this, but I have to do the mandatory fake it till you make it disclosure. Elizabeth Holmes should have done this. So let me do it just to make sure I don't get into trouble, is that, that like when you're building something, like what I want is to have like a magic wand where I could just go like bing, and the whole thing is like my vision is all built, right? Like everything I've just said, I want that now. But the problem is when building stuff out, like when you're actually doing kind of web development and this data science, it just takes a long time. And so it's just frustrating that, and my lab is very small, and it's a shoestring operation, so I don't have a big kind of engineering team working on this stuff. So I'm just being clear that where we are with what I've said is that the topic classifier is built, and we're currently integrating it, and I know that that'll be in place in time for the June meetings. The stakeholder part is still a work in progress, and there's still even disagreement in our team about like exactly how we're going to implement it. But that's something that we're still working on, and that likely won't be in place by June, but it's something that that's something we have to figure out and solve. So we're working on that. Last slide is, it's actually the second to last slide, is that I don't know if any of you have heard, there's these other kind of AI-driven discussion platforms, but I like CrowdSmart and Talk to the City and Penelope and stuff. And I want to be clear that so I think competition is good. There's like 3 billion people in the world, and so if there were multiple versions, different people were deploying a version of Prtanium, that's great, because ultimately what we want is to have this become more of kind of the scaffolding or the workflow for democracy. So I'm not being defensive here, but I just want to say that right now there's no other product that competes with Prtanium, because Prtanium has a unique set of features that it's specifically designed for public meetings. That's the use case. And in particular, it's specifically designed for synchronous public meetings, like the ones where you show up, right, and there's an official and there's that kind of synchronous interaction. So there's other platforms like Talk to the City and Penelope that are really good, but they're asynchronous, so they serve a different purpose. They're not the same. They're just different. They're just not like they do what they do really well, and what we want to do really well, but they're not the same. But there are other ones like CrowdSmart that wants to do synchronous public meetings, but we're the only platform where the technology is first and foremost driven by democratic principles, that the design is motivated by democratic principles. And so any time if you're from a public agency and somebody comes up to you and they say, we have this platform that uses AI to extract insights, from your participants, like go and look at their team and see who they are. And if they're a group of, if it's like a startup where you have a bunch of like tech people that are like, yeah, like we have this whiz-bang like use of AI that's going to give you insights, right? But if there's no underlying design that they can articulate about, and in particular to look to make sure that the team has people who understand the field of communication. And I would say if you're doing public meetings that your team is motivated and informed by normative democratic theory from the beginning, right? If you don't have that, right, and they just say, we have this tool that's going to extract insights from people using AI, I would walk away from that as fast as possible, because I wouldn't trust it, right? Maybe, but I just don't. So that's what we are. Is that my lab is a collaboration between political scientists and computer scientists, where we are like really want to use good normative democratic theory to inform the design of technology, right? And our hope is that we can design this technology in a way that makes this kind of technology kind of a routine part of democracy's workflow. And right now, it does not exist. There is nothing that can help like a public agency do something to have a constructive meeting. And so I hope that we're successful, right? But then what would make this really successful then is if we're successful and a bunch of other people also do it, it might kind of change the way technology impacts us in a kind of fundamental way. And so that's what we're hoping. So I just have to do a quick shout out to the funders. And then if you're interested, there's the landing page is Prtanium.io. And so you can go check it out if you want. So that's it. Yeah, thank you. I talked for longer. I didn't mean to talk for so long, but I got all kind of worked up.
We have time for questions and comments. I have to ask for recording purposes. Is it fine for people? You don't need a mic when people are asking their questions.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Yeah. You're gonna do the call on people. Yeah.
Great. Thank you for your talk. This is very much so needed technology. We've interacted with a lot of California public agencies, and this is definitely needed. My first question is about particular populations that are attempting to communicate with these agencies during public hearings that do not have access to the internet and cannot make it in person.
Yeah.
I'm thinking particularly like indigenous populations on reservations.
Yeah.
How does this platform integrate with those populations?
Yeah. So we're doing the best that we can to address that, but ultimately there's going to be limits to what we can do. But one thing that is the Prtanium, this will partly help, is Prtanium is built, the interface is built mobile first. So the developers, when they add a new feature, they begin by adding it to the mobile version, and then once they have it worked out, the UI on the mobile version, then they expand it to the desktop. And so that makes it mobile mobile access is much more pervasive than desktop, and so that helps. We're also, I didn't mention this, but we're building in language translation so that in the end, what we want is for Prtanium to be just language neutral, that whatever language you're using is going to be the language that you interact with. And we can do that actually because of the same large language technology is also making translation really much more effective than it was even just recently. And so ultimately, you could either just choose your language, and in fact, your browser can like detect your language, and it can default to that. But that's about the best we can do. We vet all the reading material to make sure it's accessible. The reading material we make is like for this upcoming event, it'll be translated into Spanish. But that's about the best we can do. Not sure if, unless you have thoughts about, so I'll stop talking, yeah.
Great presentation and very intriguing. Let me give you an example. A few years ago, the Board of Forestry in the state of Oregon examined a policy to widen the buffers around streams where you could not cut the trees so the trees would provide shade to cool the water in the stream. The state law requires that they conduct an economic analysis and that is the pre-decision analysis the board document that the board must consider before it makes its decision. The department defined economics as impacts on the industry. So when other people wanted to talk about impacts on, say, salmon, well,
Yeah.
no, that's an environmental impact.
Yeah.
The law requires us to do economic impacts, get out of here.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
there's a question about the agency being biased and who's gonna pick up that bias.
Yeah.
Number one. And number two, as you go through your survey, and if that had applied here, people who were concerned about salmon would have expressed their concern, but they wouldn't have known that it was going to be dismissed until they got to the meeting, and then they found out they didn't get any hearing. So is there a way for you
Yeah.
to tell the public what
Yeah.
is the distinction between the things that are in
yeah,
and the things that are out?
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
Your survey, and compare that to the material you have from the agency.
yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, so what we think is really vital is that we're transparent about everything. So what was the material, what was the reading material that we used to train the AI, and disclose that to the public. And then not only, we will disclose not only what was the topic list, right, that's scaffolding the public meeting, but what were the topics that were excluded, right? So at least the public would know that in advance. There's so we're mindful that just like there's bad actors, right, who want to undermine a meeting, there's also not every public agency is as responsive to stakeholders in the community. And I know that because like you, I talk to them in California. And we want to design the platform in a way that it's robust against public agencies. So public agencies can't use it as a tool to further their own ends, but that if they're going to use it, it's going to force them to engage with the community in this more democratic way. And so there's some things that so in addition to being transparent and disclosing the planning part, so at least the community knows, right, what was considered and excluded. One thing we want to do, and this won't be built in time for the June meeting, but something that's a big priority for us is that in real time, as people are contributing content, the AI is going to classify some things as on topic, right, which is essentially what the agency decided was on topic. But it'll also, then it'll classify some things as off topic. And what we're going to have the algorithm do is just constantly sort through the off topic bucket to try to find clusters of things that are emerging in the meeting, right? So if environmentalists, like if protection of salmon wasn't one of the original topics, but it emerged in the course of the meeting, that would get unearthed. And then we haven't thought about do we disclose that to the participants? So the design, right? So you have all of these kind of risks when you're building in a new thing to the design, and sort of what you're disclosing, you have to make sure that you're disclosing in a way that ends up making the whole platform more democratic and not. And so we haven't thought about how we would do that, but that's something we would do, is to try to make sure that those topics that were decided in advance of the meeting don't necessarily exclude other important topics that come up during the course of the meeting. But the last thing I'll say is that the community survey should help as well to protect, to make the event kind of democratically robust in the way that you would want it to be. Because if you're sending the survey out to the community, what's important in the survey is that it uncovers the diverse perspectives in the community, right? That as long as we have all those diverse perspectives in the survey, then we know sort of what the different perspectives are, what the important topics are, and what the perspectives are, right, as part of the planning. And so if there's environmentalists that care about the salmon, that'll become apparent in the survey. And if the AI is kind of trained on the community perspectives, then that'll be something that'll have to be included. I'm sorry, last thing is that the Britannium it's a UCR built platform. It's owned by UCR, And I'm not like a lot of computer science professors want to spin it off as a company to make a lot of money. And I am not doing that. And because when it's run as a university-based platform, we can design it in a way to make sure that it's designed in a way that does something good for the public, right, as opposed to doing something that's good for the people that are paying us. And so that's just something, anyway, those are just some thoughts, yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I see a lot of hands.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to recommend, and time short, is do popcorn style.
Okay.
So I'm going to take 3 questions at a time,
Yeah,
and then you can try to answer succinctly,
Okay.
and then we'll take 3 more, okay?
Okay.
I want to get as many
I'll try
as
to be
possible.
succinct
So
too, yeah.
The last few people I saw were, so story, and then you can go, and then Drew, okay?
So I have like a bit of a hypothetical, and I want to ask how you deal with it. So imagine like the gas stove topic. Imagine there's like a decent minority of the population who believes something that is just not true.
Mhm.
Like say they think gas stoves cause autism.
Mhm.
And they sincerely believe that, but that's obviously not true,
Yep.
but it is on topic.
Mhm.
How do you balance those things?
Sir.
Yes, I have an easy question. It relates to your feedback response slide.
Yeah,
There were choices for, against, conflicted, and in the lower right-hand corner was an icon which said, I wish not to answer.
Mhm.
And I don't know what that means. Does that mean present but abstain, or how is that calculated, if at all?
I'll say that just dismisses the box, so they can choose. You don't want to coerce people to answer things they don't want to
Okay,
answer.
so it
Yeah,
just dismisses the
yeah.
box. Thank you.
Drew.
So I really like this idea, but one thing I'm wondering is how do you compete with platforms like Instagram or TikTok that are designed to maximize engagement?
Yep.
So I think one of the issues with doing this ethically is that doing it ethically requires using less techniques to increase engagement, such as purposely angering.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, how do you keep this engaging?
So can I just really
Yes.
quick? So, the thing I said earlier is that I'm not trying to make Britannium. There's a lot of computer science professors want to spin off a company and make a lot of money and drive a BMW, and we're never going to do that, because the reason I went into political science is because of my commitments to democracy. And so this, like, if it makes a lot of money, that money will just fund this project. And so I don't care. Like, if it doesn't make a lot of money, as long as it's doing some good, yeah. And then in terms of if there's a mistaken view, so on the one hand, those views will probably be classified as off topic because they're factually inaccurate. But one thing that we're trying to do with the platform is orient to think of the diversity of views in terms of stakeholder perspectives. And if you think about stakeholders, there's it's sort of hard. It's not defensible to say there's not omnipotent, right, third party that says these stakeholders have legitimate views and these have illegitimate views. And if there really are stakeholders in the community that strongly believe something, then they probably need to be heard, right? But it doesn't mean that when people hear that this concern that gas stoves cause autism, everybody else in the meeting would they don't need to find it persuasive, right? So as long as stakeholder views are articulated, it's generally speaking the ones that are most compelling and most defensible are the ones that are going to have the most influence. That's what we're positing. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Why don't you 3 go?
As quick as I can. So I work as a legislative aide, and we already get, for example, thousands of emails or thousands of instances of written testimony. Is there any work on or interest in making some of the algorithmic tools
Yeah.
available for use on those kinds of things?
Great, and right behind you.
Yes.
You use the words politically neutral
Mhm.
and politically balanced.
Yep.
And in today's world,
Yep.
there's a clear imbalance if we're talking about democracy.
Yep.
And so I'm just wondering how that is emphasized within agencies as they put together their questions.
Along those lines, I'll try to keep it short, is I think a concern that comes up with this term politically neutral and diverse stakeholders is that there's power dynamics between those stakeholders, so some vested interests. And so how does this model, how can you potentially incorporate consideration? Well, Northwest Natural Gas, we're talking about this gas stove model, clearly has different sort of power relation as
Yeah.
opposed to like environmental advocacy organization.
So I am well aware, I've never worked in a legislative office, but I know the CRMs, like I talk to a lot of people on Capitol Hill and they hate them, right? And so I do think, you're right, that I hadn't actually had thought about that, but you're right that the tools that we're building would work generally for other applications. So let me think about it. Yeah, but good idea. So politically neutral, I as a political scientist, I understand there is no such thing, right? So balanced is one way you can get at that, right? And so I've worked with, nonprofits that will do things like vet the reading material to have kind of the full spectrum of views, kind of vet the reading material to make sure that it's at least balanced. I don't think, this gentleman also asked that public agencies, like they're not always, so the commission that we're working with, the only thing they care about is understanding what's going to serve the community. And so they're a pleasure to work with. Not every agency is like that. And so the best thing I've been able to think of is at least to be transparent, right? And also to build in this kind of guardrails and scaffolding that there's limits to what an agency, how much they can manipulate the meeting to get their desired ends. If we build in enough kind of guardrails and safeguards into the design, then they probably won't want to use Protanium if it's built the right way. An agency that just wants to use the tool to get what it wants is probably not going to want to use it because it's going to be designed in a way that is more inclusive than that. And then likewise, we're trying to think of the stakeholder. So we've actually just, it was in the last 6 months that we've really reoriented thinking about diversity in a community in terms of stakeholder perspectives. And I have a colleague, I don't know if you're political science, but like my colleague Arkan Fung is a professor at Harvard, is developing this theory called the theory of affected interests, where it's more about, and they have a new book that's about to come out. I haven't read it yet. But he's a good democratic theorist, and the idea is that it's not that and this sort of responds to your question about gas stoves and autism, that every stakeholder gets a chance to say its views, but it's the stakeholders that have the most compelling argument are the ones that in a deliberative sense will end up having the greatest impact. And that part of it is, right, but whether it's, like an organization that has like money and power, right, that doesn't mean that they're going to necessarily be articulating things that are compelling, right? And likewise, the majority views are not necessarily the most compelling one, right? So whether it's the majority in the community or the majority of the people who happen to show up, like if they're making arguments that aren't very good arguments, right, but there's some minority that's saying things that are really compelling, then they'll probably have a greater impact in this deliberative sense. And so that's what we're hoping, yeah. Right.
Great, thank you. Yes?
Yeah,
And then,
just
did
as
you still want to ask?
Oh, and there's one up here in the front too,
And then,
yeah.
and then Dustin, and then actually, we'll get a fourth.
Yeah.
So you use the expression normative democratic theory, which of course many people have just said is out the window at this point. So you got from the right wing,
Yeah.
still standing laws called right to work, which are the opposite. From the left, you've got the Biden administration essentially reversing Title IX by conflating the words sex and gender. So how can you even begin to think that
Yeah.
a system like this can get honesty from government agencies that are already
Yeah.
deliberately not just obfuscating issues, but lying and saying the opposite?
Yes.
Just a boomer question. I was trying to envision the public meeting at which this would all go down.
Mm-hmm.
And is everybody sitting around with their phone typing stuff in, and
Mhm.
you guys are tabulating it? Well, what about the person who has not only doesn't have access to that,
Right.
but just doesn't want to do that? They want to stand up and talk to you about it.
Oh, yeah. Good question. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a similar, just a concern, I guess, or a question about about disembodying the whole point of town halls. Because you said this is synchronous, which sort of seems counterintuitive to, which would be the actual outcome would be through asynchronous.
Yeah.
So I guess it's just a question about yeah, how do you actually, you're still gonna have people show up and derail the conversation, and isn't there value in that? And thinking about falsifying misinformation, like actually being explicit about what's misinformation, because I think there's some concern about who gets to arbitrate that.
Yeah.
And rather than like sticking out the side and being transparent, I guess, is something you're saying.
Yeah, I have the same answer for both of you, but yeah.
I'm thinking one word.
Yeah.
How often does your LLM hallucinate and
Yeah.
use, on-topic
Yeah.
questions into the off-topic bucket?
Yep.
And is that a problem you can solve yourself?
Yeah.
Maybe by increasing the sample size of the factual
Yeah.
reading material? Or is that a problem with the LLM? That you
Yeah.
can't do?
So I'm going to give you a much longer answer to that later, but the short answer is that that's what we've been working on for the last 8 months is building the algorithm, but then validating it and testing it. And so that's a much longer answer, but it's something that you do whenever you, because of the problems with AI and its hallucinations and its biases, that you need to really be to test it against benchmark data sets to validate it. And so we're doing that extensively, but we'll talk about that later. For you two, so so what we're trying to do is approximate a democratic ideal, right? We can't. There's no such thing. Like there's no way to make democracy function. And I'll get back to your question, a bigger question in a second. But but in-person meetings don't scale very well, and you really can't do this kind of algorithmic curation. In an in-person meeting, it's essentially everybody gets 3 minutes at the microphone, right? And so what that does is there's really no way that I can think of in an in-person meeting to get around the fact that you get the loudest voices are the ones that get heard in a public meeting. And I'll tell you, as a political scientist, I've been doing these like online public meetings for a long time. I had a big NSF grant that kind of led me to where I am. And people get really mad at us. Like I have to bring our campus attorneys in to like protect us because people get really angry when they have like homeowners that know that they can show up and dominate a city council meeting. The absolute last thing they want is to have that city council to use a more democratic tool that gives other people a voice. Like they don't want that, and they get really, really mad when you try to collaborate. So I'm just saying that. But in-person meetings don't scale well at all, and really for in-person meetings there isn't a way for everybody in the meeting to kind of have a voice all at the same time. And so that's kind of the benefit of online meetings is they scale better. In terms of, is that okay? Is that the best I can do? And so in terms of democratic theory, my orientation is there's a normative theory of democracy called deliberative democracy, which is mostly a procedural view that sort of if you can create the right conditions for people to engage in a discussion, then people are typically going to engage the discussion constructively. And it's sort of thinking about the design. And so I think part of the reason that we're so frustrated with current politics, right, whether it's the administration or it's your city council meeting, is that we don't really have very good designs in place in our democracy. It's just something that we haven't really thought through, like at the design level of how do we structure our interactions in a way that that induce us to engage each other in a constructive way, right? And so social media, like we know that it's like causing us to be destructive, right? And that's by their design, right? But we don't really have the same kind of effort to think about how do we redesign, any democratic process to make it more inclusive and more constructive and informative. And that's just like what I try to do. And it's like, yeah, I'm trying, yeah. So doing the best I can, yeah.
Excellent. So I think we've reached, one more question, last one. Elena, you have the last one.
I can always ask later if we need to go.
Go ahead.
Okay, I kind of have two. So kind of echoing Madison's concerns about sort of selection bias in this, I'm concerned that asking people to provide their reasoning or forcing them to provide their reasoning is going to filter out those people, and you're still going to get the most voiceful, boisterous, sort of angry groups. And then on this, sort of similarly with that sort of run that risk again also of like only really getting the people who are
Yeah.
like, politically active
Yeah.
to want to engage with that. Like I know the census has a really hard time
Yeah.
doing this sort of thing. And then second thing on the topic of misinformation, you say that it kind of pushes it to the side, but I'm wondering if it would be valuable to actually address that misinformation, especially if the point of
Yeah.
this is to boost democratic communication,
Right.
sort of debunking some of that or clarifying, like, actually, no, like these gas stoves don't do this, or
Right.
sorry, but like that's not the legal parameter of what we're looking at.
Yeah. So, why am I blanking on what your first question? Because I had a good answer to
Concerns
it.
about selection bias.
Oh, right, yeah. And so for both the community survey as well as this in-session polling, what we're doing with those surveys is different from what you normally do with the surveys. So normally you distribute surveys because you want to find like the distribution of opinions in a community, right? So you need to make sure that it's representative and you have the right, that your sample is representative. We're not doing that with the surveys. When you're using these large, but our design that leverages these large language models is detecting perspectives, right? So as long as one person in the community shared a perspective, then that's in the system. And if we had 1,000 people in the community share the identically same perspective, that's one perspective, right? And so it's a very different way. And likewise, when people fill out the reasoning, what we're able to do then is to sort of see, well, what are the diverse perspectives that are articulated? We're not necessarily, like, we can see the distribution of choices, but in terms of understanding perspectives, right, a perspective is a perspective, no matter how many people say it, right? And so that's what so it's a different way of thinking about surveys. And then your point about misinformation, I cannot answer that because that's a big field. I think as you know, that there's people, and there's concerns about when you correct people that gas stoves don't cause autism, right? That there's debate about, like, when you say that, does it make people even think it even more so? And I don't know, like, it's not my area, but that's a really great question and one that we hadn't thought about yet. So
Perfect.
Yeah.
I have to close with an observation. In this public meeting, the proportion of participants or audience members who participated is off the charts.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the second observation is that, Kevin, you're amazing at answering so many questions quickly.
Oh, thank you.
I appreciate that. So thank you for really compelling
Yeah.
discussion.
Yeah, thanks.